Good morning and welcome. My name is Isaiah Sego, and I have been teaching math at Johnson CDS High School for the last 10 years. As a member of Educators for Excellence, or E4E, in Los Angeles for 5 years, I have worked to create inclusive and welcoming school environments that honor our students' backgrounds and social emotional needs. As a teacher in the Watts community of Southeast Los Angeles, many of my students have faced poverty, neglect, abuse, or even incarceration. And so it is my job to educate my students as well as making sure that I'm responsible for advocating for them. This is what led me to E4E, where our mission is to ensure that we as teachers have a leading voice in the policies that impact our students and profession. I'm honored to be here with Peggy Brookins, President and CEO of the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards, Madeline Will from Education Week, and my peers from around the nation to present to you the findings of Voices from the Classroom, a survey of America's educators. Designed for teachers by teachers, my 11 colleagues and I on the survey's Teacher Advisory Group, or TAG team as we call it, designed this national survey together so we could gather teachers' valuable insights into what's working and what needs to be changed in our schools, districts, unions, states, and at the federal level. As teachers, we know the challenges affecting our students and our schools. So we are the ones in the classroom not only teaching our students, but building relationships with them, their families, and the community, and identifying challenges and creating solutions on the ground. This survey brings together the knowledge and diverse perspectives of America's educators, and we hope administrators, community leaders, and policymakers are listening to what we have to say and will turn these ideas into action. Let's hear now from some of my colleagues and educators who will explain why and how we created this groundbreaking survey. Thank you.
Important that teachers are validated because we're the ones that are doing this every day.
The idea is that teachers don't feel like their voice is being heard.
But teachers are the ones who are living this work out through their day-to-day lives.
It's very important for us to be part of the conversation.
To make sure that we are the ones making decisions about the policies that we are actually asked to enforce.
The goal of the survey is to get ideas and feedback from teachers about several different dynamics in the teaching profession.
In order to design the survey, I was part of the teacher advisory group to help develop the questions that would be included in the survey. We helped develop the questions by brainstorming and talking about the most important issues for us teachers, trying to meet the needs of our students in the classroom.
It's important to ask specific questions if you want to get valuable data from your teachers, and I think having input in how those questions are phrased and in how the priorities of teachers are represented within the questions is something that I really wanted input on. What makes the survey unique is the scope of it, the fact that you have 1,000 teachers.
And it was a representative sample of all kinds of public school teachers, charter school teachers, union, non-union.
A pretty full spectrum snapshot of how all these different questions and issues of quality in education play out in suburban areas, rural and urban areas as well.
So it's not just one teacher saying how they feel, it's 1,000 teachers saying how they feel. So it's really powerful in that we get feedback and dynamic results from teachers across the country.
These issues that I care about, my colleagues care about, are affecting our kids. We have to speak up about them, and we have to discuss them, and we have to change them. We have to look at the systems, because if we don't, then things aren't going to change.
These are the same things people talk about at the water cooler at school and the teacher's lounge. It's just that now they're on paper.
But what made this survey really stand out was that it was formalized, and now we have that data that we can bring to a policymaker.
There are a lot of people who do want to help, who do want to be a part of the solution, but they don't know where to start.
Policymakers need to be listening. Other teachers who didn't participate in the survey need to be listening. Parents need to be listening. Students even need to be listening because students are ultimately the ones that are impacted.
This survey will better inform the public on why it's important to understand what teachers are going through and how they can be more equipped and better informed to teach their children, our children.
The main thing that stuck out to me is that nationally, we are very aligned.
Teachers all across the country have the same feelings. So it's not just that I'm from New England and we kind of have maybe a more conservative view. People out in Chicago, LA, Minnesota have the same views that we all have.
How unsurprising the results were is actually very exciting.
And that moving forward, whatever we're going to decide to fight for, we're on the same page.
Thank you, Isaiah, and thank you to all the amazing teachers that were featured in that video and helped contribute to this survey. My name is Evan Stone, and I'm one of the co-founders and co-CEOs at Educators for Excellence. When Sydney Morris, my co-CEO, and I were teachers in the Bronx, we were frustrated with an inequitable education system, with a system that denied teachers, the real classroom experts, a channel to share their knowledge with decision makers and to reach their full potential. These 12 teachers, along with E4E colleagues across the country, are changing that dynamic. They are elevating their voices and speaking with decision makers to spur change on behalf of their students and their profession. We are thrilled that through this survey, teachers have yet another powerful platform to share their insights and knowledge beyond the confines of their classrooms and schools. I'm going to take us a little bit through some of the information about the survey. This survey, like all surveys, is a snapshot in a moment in time, and teachers' answers are a reflection of everything else going on in the country and in the education system. And 2018 has been a tumultuous year in many ways, and in the education world, it's no different. Yet among the diverse education issues dominating the headlines in the spring of 2018, when this survey was in the field, there was a single unifying factor: teacher voice. This has been a year of highs and lows for teachers having their say, with teachers successfully advocating on behalf of themselves and their students across the country, speaking out against violence in their schools, watching also while the Supreme Court handed down a verdict in Janus v. AFSCME that places in jeopardy the influence of our collective voices and our unions. Hundreds of thousands of teachers took to the streets this year, filling Capitol buildings and running for office to bring about the changes that they want to see in their profession and for their kids. In the largest demonstrations of teacher power in decades, teachers went in strike in state after state, asking for more resources for students and more pay for themselves. In addition to signaling to potential educators that teaching is a stable profession, administrators will also need to reassure them that it can be a safe workplace. In 2018, as of June, more than 20,000 students attended a school where a shooting occurred. And casualties from school shootings were the highest ever in a single academic year. These tragedies thrust communities into contentious debates on how to best end incidences of school violence. Some argued for arming teachers or doubling down on traditional exclusionary discipline practices, while others called for gun control, discipline strategies aimed at teaching students to make better decisions without sending them out of class, and fostering school climates and supports to enforce students' social emotional well-being. If 2018 is any indication, teachers will not be content to return to their more traditional role of being the subjects of change. They are increasingly interested in being agents of change, leveraging their experience and expertise to improve our education system. And if they are wise, our policymakers will listen. So now a little bit about our methodology. Our survey questionnaire was developed by Isaiah and 11 more inspiring educators who you'll meet shortly. And the instrument was administered by the Gotham Research Group and an independent research firm. The survey was conducted online in April and May of this year, and the sample was 1,000 full-time public school teachers, which is representative of the national population, balancing district and charter school teachers. It aligns with key demographic variables of gender and region in the country, race, ethnicity, age, years of teaching experience, level of education attained, school type, and subjects taught. After an analysis of more than 180 questions, we identified the 6 key trends that are called out in this report. The first of those trends is about the feeling that teachers have of economic insecurity. Teachers are very concerned right now about their economic security, about their wages and benefits and job security. We saw this across a wide variety of education issues, such as recruitment and retention, representation, retirement, and equity. Teachers are prioritizing a range of financial solutions to bring greater stability and equity to our education system. For instance, a majority believe financial incentives, such as sign-on bonuses, higher starting salaries, loan forgiveness programs, are the most effective means to recruit and retain talented and diverse colleagues in the classrooms. This is especially true to recruit teachers for hard-to-staff schools and hard-to-staff subjects. Additionally, 3 out of 4 teachers responded that a higher salary would be the most motivating factor to keep them in the classroom for their entire career. Expectations of teachers' unions are straightforward and aligned with their financial focus. Teachers are looking to their unions first to protect their salaries, benefits, and jobs. They are also torn about traditional pension systems, with nearly equal percentages of teachers saying they'd prefer either a pension or a defined contribution plan, such as a 401k or 403b. And a substantial majority of teachers believe inequitable school funding and resource distribution are problems in their states. The second key finding is that we're finding that teachers are seeking more opportunities to lead, which at E4E is not surprising. A staggering 92% of teachers say they wish there were more opportunities to further their careers and professional skills while staying in the classroom. Teachers nearly unanimously agree that they should be compensated for taking on these additional responsibilities. However, when asked if they would do this without pay, they also said they would. Yet despite this widespread desire, less than half of teachers indicate that they feel supported by their administrators to take on leadership roles. Third, teachers want more opportunities to be heard beyond their classroom and within their unions to shape policy at all levels. No other question in the survey garnered more unanimous support than the 96% of teachers who agreed they wish there were more opportunities as teachers to influence education policy that impacts their profession and their students. Unfortunately, though, teachers do not feel their perspective is being heard or represented in policy decisions at their school, represented by their union, in their district, or by their charter network, at the state level or at the federal level. The further teachers are from the decision-making body, with just 6% of teachers saying they see their perspective greatly represented at the policy at the federal level, the less they feel heard. Given teachers' unions' fundamental role as a voice for teachers, it was surprising to us that only about 1 in 4 teachers believe their perspective is reflected a great deal within their union. While the Supreme Court ruling in Janus v. AFSCME, possibly the best way for unions to ensure that teachers can see them as aligned with their policy values and opt in to remain members, is to engage with teachers directly. As it stands, more than 1/4 of teachers responded that they are a member of their union because they have to be, rather than because they want to be. Our fourth finding was around school safety and discipline. While 9 out of 10 teachers believe that their schools have an inclusive environment honoring the identities and potential of all their students, nearly 1 out of 3 teachers reporting fearing for their physical safety, sometimes or often at school. And as you know, the NRA and President Trump have proposed training teachers to carry guns, but 65% of teachers oppose this idea, with more than 50% expressing very strong opposition. And while some have suggested that the 2014 federal guidance on school discipline, which aimed to reduce disparities in discipline and reduce suspensions and expulsions, could be to blame for incidences like school shootings, teachers see this issue very differently. To manage discipline and to make schools safer, teachers found positive behavior reinforcement and restorative practices the most effective, greatly preferring them to the punitive and exclusionary practices of out-of-school suspensions and expulsions. The fifth thing we found was around accountability. The inclusion of student performance data has been controversial as we've rolled out teacher evaluation systems and school accountability systems over the last 10 years. In many cases, the pushback from teachers and teachers' unions has been characterized as opposition to the inclusion of any measures of student achievement. And while it is true that teachers remain skeptical of the ability of standardized tests to fully capture student learning, teachers strongly prioritize measures of student academic growth as the single most valuable metric in evaluating both schools and educators' effectiveness. In short, teachers are not afraid of accountability. In addition to academic growth to evaluate a school's effectiveness, teachers want measures of school climate and culture to be considered, such as disciplinary data and feedback from students and parents. And in evaluations of their own effectiveness, teachers also value their daily work, student projects, and portfolios as examples of learning. The last finding we found was around school choice. Although less than 1/3 of teachers support universal school vouchers, low-income school vouchers, or charter schools, while almost half support tax credits for low-income students. What was less expected is that the survey results indicate that only a very small minority of teachers, 6%, are actually opposed to all forms of school choice. In fact, a majority of public school teachers, including unionized teachers, support school choice so long as it doesn't take funds out of the public system, is equally accessible to all students, and doesn't discriminate against any students based on their race or religion or any other factors. These findings, as well as the rest of the survey data, are remarkably consistent across major demographic groups of teachers, across regions of our country, and across school characteristics, such as grade levels taught or school size, and they're remarkably consistent between unionized and non-unionized teachers. In the report, however, we did want to pull out a few distinct groups, and we profiled 3 groups of teachers to capture their unique perspectives. First, of early career educators, next, of teachers in underserved communities, and finally, of teachers of color. Please let's all together take a look at one of these profiles now. Matt Clark, an early career teacher in Boston, will share how early teachers, as a group, stand out and are distinct from their peers. Matt.
Good morning. I'm Matt Clark, and I've taught history for 7 years, currently at West Roxbury Academy, Massachusetts, and I'd like to talk to you about early career teachers. I'm one of the 18% of educators under the age of 30 who eagerly found our way to the classroom for the love of teaching students. Teaching is not an easy job, and early career teachers are often the ones serving in our most high-need schools, often without the proper training or resources to meet the diverse needs of our students. Despite our passion for teaching and our students, almost 1 in 5 of teachers leave the profession in their first 5 years. That's why I'm glad we asked questions to better understand what works to recruit and retain teachers just starting out and the tools we need to succeed early in our careers. Talking to early career educators also provides valuable insight into where teacher opinion is headed in the years to come. So, let's take a look at the findings for early career teachers. First, we are more positive about the preparation we received before teaching. And we are more likely than our counterparts to say that our teacher preparation program prepared us for many critical modern elements of teaching, including culturally relevant instruction, using data to inform instruction, differentiating our instruction to meet students' diverse needs, supporting students' social emotional well-being, integrating technology into the classroom, and engaging parents and guardians in student learning. While most teachers, including myself, think that teacher preparation programs still fail to fully prepare new teachers to succeed on day one, this trend suggests that these programs may be evolving to better prepare teachers for the challenges of today's classrooms. Second, we are more likely than our colleagues to want to spend more time devoted to professional development, particularly with regard to supporting unique learners such as English language learners and students with special needs, and exploring alternatives to punitive discipline. While we're also more interested in working closely with other teachers, whether collaborating with colleagues or participating in union-related activities, we show more interest in compiling, tracking, and analyzing student data and reaching out to parents to keep them engaged in students' learning. These trends signal that early career teachers are particularly open to learning from our peers and honing our skills as educators to better reach our students within our classroom and beyond. Third, a greater percentage of early career teachers are open to pay structures beyond traditional steps and lanes. We are more likely to favor financial incentives to recruit and retain talented and diverse educators, including for teachers who work in hard-to-staff schools or in hard-to-staff subjects, who receive outstanding evaluations or national board accreditation, or who take on leadership positions in our school or district. Perhaps because pension tiers are less generous for my generation of teachers than they used to be, or because there are concerns that our pensions will not be there when we finally retire, early career teachers are more skeptical of pensions. More than half said they would prefer a defined contribution plan, such as a 401k or 403b, to a pension, and more than half would opt for a smaller pension in exchange for a higher salary. It is also important to note that nearly 1 in 5 of us said they did not know enough to make a choice. Fourth, while the majority of teachers across the country believe inequity in education is a serious problem in the United States, we are particularly attuned to this injustice. A higher percentage of early career teachers see inequitable school funding and unequal access to high-quality schools, excellent educators, properly maintained school facilities, and classroom supplies and resources as serious problems. This may be because younger teachers often spend the early portion of their careers in some of our country's more under-resourced, higher-need schools serving vulnerable students. And early career teachers say they are more likely than later career teachers to strike over resources and support services for students. Fifth, we are generally more open to school choice options than later career teachers, particularly when they create opportunity for low-income students. We are also much more supportive of low-income vouchers and tax credits to help low-income parents, the top 2 preferred school choice options among early career educators. Sorry. This may reflect the fact that teachers under 30 are more likely to teach in communities with students from low-income families who might benefit from these choice options. Last and least surprising, early career teachers are less certain about whether or not we will spend our entire careers as classroom teachers than our more experienced counterparts. Though the majority who say they are likely to leave the classroom do not plan to leave education altogether. The pressure we feel to become administrators to advance our careers further demonstrates that we do not always see a clear path for ourselves within the classroom. As a young teacher, I am most excited that my early career colleagues are eager to learn and work together and spend their entire career in education. I believe this generation of professionals willing to collaborate in the service of their students will usher in a leap forward for education. And it's also a great sign that our preparation programs are improving. But as a teacher in a high-needs school, I know we still have a long way to go to make sure our students are getting excellent teachers and that our system gives teachers the trainings and support to be excellent. If our education system takes special care of its educators from the start of ed school through their first years in the classroom, our students will have better outcomes. Thank you. Now to talk about how all teachers can use their voice for their students and profession, I want to introduce our panel on teacher leadership, moderated by Peggy Brookings, President and CEO of the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. Her long career as an educator includes many national leadership positions and accolades, including serving as a member of President Barack Obama's Advisory Commission on Educational Excellence for African Americans. Please welcome Peggy Brookings.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you to Sydney and to Evan as well for the invite here and this incredible panel that we'll have in front of us. The results from the survey and how we've teed up the trends already. I'm excited that we have this group on the stage because we have the wisdom of the crowd, I'll call it, when we talk about the findings and their experiences as well. So I really want to start off with each of you just introducing yourselves, and then we'll just dive right in.
Hello, my name is Nivia Vizarraga, and I'm an elementary school special education teacher in Reseda, California. I've been teaching for 11 years, and I've been a national board certified teacher for the last 4 years. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cameron Maxwell. I teach 7th and 8th grade English language arts in East Harlem, and I've been teaching in East Harlem for 6 years now.
Good morning, my name is Christina Kim. I have been teaching in LAUSD for the past 13 years. Currently, I'm a Title III instructional coach, specifically working with English language learners.
Great. Evan kind of teed up this first question that we want to talk about, and it said that no other question in the survey generated more unanimous response than the 96% of teachers who agreed that they wish they had more opportunities to influence education policy. So Christina, I want to start with you and talk about what your experience has been and why teachers feel that their voices need to be heard.
Teachers feel that their voices need to be heard because I remember a lot of the policies that were implemented, it didn't make sense. I didn't feel like it was always the best for our students. And if it did, I felt like at times it wasn't implemented effectively. And so when we're talking about education policy, we're talking about our profession, our students, our schools, and the communities that we serve. So we're with the students every single day. We know what works, we know what they need. And so I think it's very important and valuable that our voices are included. And I think in education right now, there's a lot of people with good intentions who haven't been in the classroom or who haven't been in the classroom for a long time. And so there's a disconnect. And I think that's where our voices can come in and make that connection for policymakers. And I believe that that's why it's important that we are part of the conversation to design and implement policies, because teacher buy-in is important. If you don't have teacher buy-in, it's not going to work. And I've been part of hundreds of different types of professional development. I have been in amazing meetings where I'm excited to come out and implement some of the things I learned in the classroom, and I still do it today. And there are times when I come out of some of these meetings or professional development where I'm kind of confused, it wasn't very explicit, and so I didn't do a good job implementing it. So with that said, in 2013, LAUSD passed the School Climate Bill of Rights, where all schools in LAUSD must implement restorative justice. Now, a group of teachers, we got together. We knew that this was an important practice because it's an alternative measure to suspension, and we know that boys of color are suspended at a higher rate. And knowing our experience, knowing that we went through all these professional developments that were effective and not effective, we wanted to be part of the implementation and planning out how our district will do this. And so we got involved with our union, passed the motion, and that's like one way we're trying to change the system.
Great, and that just leads to the next question here, that one of the findings, we said that teachers by nature of being in the classroom every day have this unique perspective about the biggest hurdles that we face in education and also how to solve those. More than 8 out of 10 teachers in the survey identified inequitable funding and access to resources as a problem within their states, and I think we can all attest to that. Despite this consensus, changing funding formulas and moving away from the status quo can be difficult and sometimes contentious for a lot of teachers who are going through that process and systems as well. So Cameron, what do you wish the average person understood about how inequity in our schools impacts our students?
Well, the first thing I want them to understand is that when we're debating school budgets and we're debating where we should put money, it's not an academic exercise, that there are real-world consequences for every decision that we make. It can feel sometimes in the news media like we're just tracking a few different people arguing over a few different decimals or a few different digits, but there are real consequences. There's no such thing as doing more with less in education. If you take money out of a school budget, that means fewer resources, fewer supplies, fewer services that principals have available for their students. So that's the first thing I'd like them to know. The other is that fair does not mean equal in education for all the reasons that Isaiah started by identifying. Of poverty creates situations of neglect, abuse, trauma, and that really impacts how kids are able to perform in school. I'm thinking of a 7th grade girl that I taught last year. I'll call her Erica, who was very well spoken with adults, could be very polite and poised within the right setting, but when she was around her peer group, because of her learning disabilities, she felt very self-conscious. Because of her social emotional disabilities, she felt very resistant to whatever instructions the teachers were giving. She created a lot of chaos and a lot of conflict within whatever room she walked into. Their mental health professionals at our school are completely overtaxed, and they can't handle a case like hers because we had one psychologist working with a K-8 school of over 400 kids in 2 days a week. And these kind of things might work in other districts. Maybe that arrangement is possible, but for my kids in East Harlem, it's simply not enough. So that's the second main takeaway I'd like them to understand, is that fair does not mean equal in school funding.
So the survey results are very clear about teachers who want to take on leadership roles, and that those leadership roles allow them to better help shape what happens within their schools. Almost all teachers say that they wish they had more opportunities to further their career while remaining in the classroom, something I got to do myself, which I think is absolutely necessary. But a lot of teachers didn't feel supported by administration around these leadership roles. So Nivea, talk to us about how can administrators give teachers the opportunity to grow their potential and grow their learning, their skills, and still remain in the classroom?
I think there's definitely several steps that administrators can take to make sure that they support their teachers in their growth in their careers. First, they must create time and space so that teachers can take part in professional development opportunities. Second, we don't want these opportunities to be limited to traditional teacher skills. We also want to learn how to run a school, such as budgeting, such as long-term planning, maybe working with the community. And third, I think administrators can create teacher leadership roles that can match teachers' interests and leverage their talents so that we can help run a school. At my current school, I've been able to take leadership opportunities. As the years have come on, there's been more opportunity for that, such as working with individuals and working with the larger school community. I've been a mentor. As a National Board Certified teacher, I'm able to mentor new teachers and help with their practice, and I think that really helps refine my practice as well. Also working specifically with grade levels who are administering the state test. So I've been responsible for the delivery of the professional development to train these teachers in being able to accommodate their students and again, give the test to them. And I've also been part of the School Site Council, which is the committee that recommends and plans for the expenditures of the single plan for student achievement. So as you can see, there definitely are opportunities, and I think it really helps with building capacity at your school and being a partner with your administration.
I think that's absolutely necessary. So one of the things the survey brought forth was the need for teachers' unions to take a kind of a different view. So the survey said 85% of teachers regard the unions as essential or important. So I think, Christina, give us your view of, are they representing the perspective of every teacher? And if not, how could that happen?
I think it's definitely difficult to represent all 100%, but we could definitely get close, right? As a new teacher, I thought our union was solely there to focus on grievances and contract negotiation. But through my involvement with the union, I realized that it is a space where I can actually advocate for the things that I want to see in my school district. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. So that's one thing our union can do to convey that message, that there are spaces for you to advocate for things that you want, aside from the traditional things that we know the unions are there for. Another thing I feel like our union should do is definitely conduct an in-house survey, especially from the decision from the Janus case. I think this is really important. This is something UTLA, my union, has done recently in the past few weeks. And from that survey result, there's so many things that we can do to address the interest of the members. We could create working groups or write motions surrounding it. Another thing I feel like our unions can do is have them go into the school sites, engage with their members, build relationships, and I think that's going to make people feel more comfortable about joining the union and working with the union. And lastly, I do feel that there are many things our unions have fought for and want for us that teachers don't know. And so maybe creating a flyer or even a social media campaign showing like, these are some things that we fought for you and you have this because of us. And I think teachers will be surprised, and I don't think they'll say, oh, I don't need my union. So those are some ideas.
Great, that's kind of a perfect segue into one of the next findings that was particularly interesting, was that so many teachers were open to structures beyond steps and lanes. Cameron, you were surprised by this, and thinking about the different options, why do you think so many teachers support financial incentives for teaching in hard-to-staff schools or hard-to-staff subjects?
It's because they've seen these incentive programs work. When we're in a situation in a difficult, high-needs school that puts a lot of pressure on teachers to perform and to succeed, it helps to have money behind that, so to raise not only the status of the profession, but also to raise the sense of self-worth of the teacher. Recruitment and retention issues are really huge where I teach. And part of that is because nationwide there are a few positions that are really difficult to staff out always. But a lot of the problems with recruitment are really coming from other factors. One of the survey results, or one of the findings that really jumped out at me, was that between the year 2000 and now, if you look at what's happened adjusted for inflation, teacher salaries have actually gone down by about $1,600 per year. Now you contrast that with your average undergraduate degree holder who's seen their wages rise about $6,500 each year. So if you're looking for, as a principal, if you're trying to make a pitch for somebody to get involved in education, it becomes much more difficult when they feel that this is not a path towards a successful financial future. The other really difficult part is retaining effective teachers. I think one of the, again, a statistic that really jumped out at me was in the depths of the recession between 2009 and 2014, when you would think a lot of teachers would be drawn to a historically recession-proof career, teacher enrollment within teacher training programs actually decreased by about 35%. And now the principals make up that difference by relying on teachers without traditional training programs, teachers who may not be adequately prepared for the classroom. And they're put in a position where oftentimes they're set up either to fail or to really struggle. And if you have a lot of struggles and not a lot of support as a first and second year teacher, you're not going to be part of your community for very long. You're not going to be able to develop those close ties between you and your student body that only experience brings. So when we're talking about financial incentives and reasons for teachers to want to put more into developing their schools, I think we got to remember that we need to reward people like Nivea and like Christina, who are working so hard within their own contexts to bring about positive change within their school. We need to make sure that that work is rewarded. And if we do that, if teachers are able to get more money doing things that they love and putting extra effort into their practice, then schools are going to benefit, and teacher-student success is going to proliferate.
Reward you as well.
Yeah, there you go.
So you brought up an issue about retention, and one of the things is job satisfaction. And I think a lot of us just love our work so much, but there are things that could change. And when we clearly know that this is part of the equation around retention, according to the survey, about 4 in 10 teachers say they feel pressure to become an administrator to further their careers. So, Nivea, do you think hybrid roles, which could allow teachers to stay in the classroom while pursuing leadership opportunities, could benefit both teachers and students?
Well, with many career paths, you are expected to move on to the next best thing. And I think for teachers, historically, there's been fewer career paths, so that's meant more administrative roles. But teachers have a lot of passion. They want to continue to grow in the service of their students, in the service of their whole school community. And I think hybrid roles really offer our stronger teachers the option to do that and remain in the classroom. I think it gives teachers the ability to evolve in their careers and feel like they can bring that back to their students. And they do feel that sense of responsibility to come back and support them. I think when you lead from the classroom, it allows you to have teacher perspective and bring that to policy discussions, which will help in ensuring that your student needs are being heard and understood. And I think these policies will help with our, again, with our students and for us. So I think hybrid roles are really a wonderful way. And as you have said, you've been part of that in the past, where you are able to run a school as well as still stay in the classroom and get that fulfillment. It's a big sense of fulfillment that you can get.
It truly is, and it gives you credibility at the same time. I was doing professional development, running a school, but teaching in the middle of the day. And it was one of those things where if you were out and people said, well, does this really work in a classroom? Absolutely, yes, it does. I do that on a daily basis. So it is definitely something that I think teachers should experience. It gives you the perspective from both sides. So I think it's marvelous. So let's move on and talk about retirement benefits. It's clear that the survey results that teachers want to have more say about the politics that impacts their classrooms. But it's true also about their salary and benefits that they receive. They want more kind of say in what happens there or better understanding of it. When it comes to their retirement, nearly as many teachers said that they would prefer a defined contribution plan like a 401k or a 403b, as they would prefer a pension plan. And depending on when you came into the system, some people had choices in different states as well. So there's also a high number that weren't sure, and Evan brought this up earlier. And Cameron, tell me what you think, why you think so many teachers are open to this pension alternative.
Well, I think part of it is just the nature of being a teacher. You're kind of usually a strong-willed, independent person, someone who likes to take control over your own life. So I think the prospect of being able to control where you're putting your retirement investments is something that appeals to a lot of teachers. I also think it's in large measure due to some of the political trends that Evan was discussing earlier. I think when you look at what happens in the state houses in West Virginia, in Kentucky, in Oklahoma, in Colorado, in Arizona, pensions was a huge animating issue in each of those cases that got teachers out and got them passionate. And this is something that is true throughout all 50 states, is that if retirement benefits are hugely important to us, and that's a big part of what keeps us in the profession. I think the Janus decision is also something else that has teachers feeling a lot of anxiety of, you know, people who used to be my advocate in the past may not be there in the future to do so anymore if these funds aren't in place. So I think they fear being left off the table. They fear that the traditional pension system that they've grown accustomed to is under attack, and that as a result, they're going to start to try to look at alternative methods and defend the ones that they know.
So being worried about that, pay, benefits, teachers are also absolutely enthusiastic about taking on leadership without additional pay, and a lot of us have done that in the past. So, Nivea, why do you think teachers are so hungry for these opportunities?
Because teachers are very passionate about what they do. We didn't go into the profession for the salary, but I think the sense of fulfillment really comes from reaching our students, being able to help other teachers and helping our school. Of course, we want to be paid fairly, but what we really want to focus on is being able to grow and help our students continue as well to grow and be successful. As a special education teacher, I do feel very privileged that I get to work with some of my students for not only 1 year as a general education teacher would, but for several years. I'm thinking of a student that just recently graduated from 5th grade. So my school goes from kindergarten through 5th grade. And some of the students that I service, they may get identified for an IEP in, let's say, 2nd grade. Sometimes they come in from preschool already with an IEP. So the student that I'm thinking about is a very different student from 5th grade to back when she was in kindergarten when she first started with me. And back in kindergarten, she really had lots of difficulty with communication, being able to participate and being part of the group, even in a small group setting. We would have to, my assistant and I would have to have her repeat what we wanted her to say, but a lot of the times she would just stay quiet. It took her some time to feel comfortable in the classroom. Now, she just graduated, and her communication skills, even though she may still have some struggles, she feels confident, and she's an example to my other students, and I think she's absolutely ready to go to middle school next school year.
Excellent, excellent. So the other part of the survey, that teachers signal in the survey that there is a sizable disconnect between policy priorities and those of decision makers and those of teachers. Only a third of teachers say that they are represented at the school level, and meaning you have more access to decision making at the school level. But as you move up to the district or your union or state or national, that decreases considerably when you get to that point. So Christina, why do you think teachers don't feel represented? And how can they become more involved in the decision-making process, and kind of what opportunities would allow that?
I think there's definitely a lot of reasons why they feel that they're not represented. But I think a big part of it has to do with not knowing that there are these opportunities where they can come and voice their opinion. When I started realizing that when I got involved with Educators for Excellence and my union, that there is a space where I can advocate for my students, our schools, for the communities that we serve. And with that said, I feel that I ran for a seat for the UTLA House of Reps, and in that moment, I was able to realize that I could advocate for better professional development surrounding restorative justice, more planning time involving Common Core, and all these other areas. And because of my involvement, I felt very empowered, and I felt that I can make a difference in my students' lives. And even being here in DC, this is like an amazing opportunity. I never thought that this would be even possible. We're terrified up here, but this is crazy. And there are spaces available. And so I encourage teachers to get more involved, reach out to their chapter chairs and their union, reach out to different organizations that work surrounding education, and see what they can do so that they can feel more represented and be involved. And You know, our profession it can be very isolating. I have driven home crying often and being angry and frustrated. But when I come to these spaces, I feel so empowered because there are other educators that want to push for change that I believe in. And so there is this sense of hope. And my hope is that moving forward, our unions, our district, and even the Department of Education will engage with us better, and that we will work together to make education accessible for all of our students, especially students of color, students who come from low socioeconomic background, English language learners, students who identify as LGBTQ, and so forth.
Wow. So, well said. So I said at the beginning the wisdom, so you can see that we do have the wisdom of the crowd up here on the panel. So join me in thanking Christina and Cameron and Navita for all the wisdom they've brought to this panel. And I want to welcome to the stage another teacher, Lauren Lieberman, who will give us some insight into the day-to-day lives of teachers and understanding working in underserved communities. So, thank you.
Thank you, Peggy, and the Teacher Advisory Group for providing some great stories behind those trends. They certainly resonate with me in my own experience. My name is Lauren Lieberman, and I will be starting my 35th year of teaching. I taught 2 years in San Antonio, and then I came back to Hartford, Connecticut, where I've been teaching special education ever since. I have taught from early childhood all the way through high school. Right now I'm teaching in a middle school in special education, and I also am teaching a graduate level course for teacher candidates. I've stayed in teaching because I'm passionate about improving outcomes for students in underserved communities. And I'm thrilled this fall that one of my former student teachers is going to be joining me in my school as a special education teacher. Students at my school and so many schools in underserved communities need all the support that we can provide them as educators. I'm here today to talk to you about what we've heard from teachers across the country who serve students from low-income households and students of color. We see how these inequities in our education system often prevent our most vulnerable students from thriving in our schools. Meeting students with diverse and complex needs is no easy task. This is particularly true for my colleagues and I, who often are teaching in crowded classrooms, in poorly maintained school facilities with fewer resources. This can make it difficult to attract and retain high-quality educators where they are most needed. Responses from teachers in these underserved communities provide insight into the challenges we face and how we can improve historically underserved students' access to excellent educators. Teachers in underserved communities are, not surprisingly, more concerned about educational inequity. As a school's proportion of underserved students increases, the sense of inequity increases among our teachers, particularly with regards to supplies and facilities. But this also extends to access to excellent educators. Having Georgina join my school before the start of the school year is an exception rather than a rule. Districts like mine serving vulnerable students often hire at the end of the summer, meaning that the students with the highest needs miss out on the strongest teacher candidates. And resources seem to be getting scarcer with each passing year, limiting our access to basic classroom supplies and our students' access to programs that'll help them develop a broad range of talents. With my special needs students who already struggle with academics, they miss out on experiences that often make school engaging for them, from arts to sports to field trips outside a neighborhood they rarely leave. We as teachers have to dig deep to give our students the supports and opportunities to be successful. But we do this without the resources or recognition we deserve, which is why we feel undervalued and underrepresented. We are less likely to feel valued by our districts, states, and students' parents. And we feel our views are less represented than those of our colleagues in our schools, district or charter networks, our states, and at the federal level. We feel the most unsafe, yet we oppose arming teachers. We are more concerned about students fighting and community violence, and we believe our schools do not do as good of a job training teachers on how to address school safety. But we do not support arming teachers to address these safety issues. This is particularly true for teachers of students of color, who are most opposed across any teacher subgroup, according to the survey. This may be because we are aware that conscious or unconscious bias can lead teachers to perceive these students as threatening. But there is a silver lining, and this is it. We are committed to our students. Despite the challenges we face, the majority of educators teaching in underserved schools plan to stay in the field, which is encouraging. And we seek more development and training and alternatives to punitive discipline, engaging with students, families, and trauma-informed teaching to better reach our children. It's a fact that gives me hope for teachers like Georgina. Working in these communities can be overwhelming, and teachers will not stay if they don't find the support they need to be successful. Georgina will be entering the classroom in September with a passion for teaching and her students. If we want her to stay for over 30 years, we will need to address these inequities and resources to make this vital job more challenging than it needs to be. Georgina deserves as much, and so do her students. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce the next panel, who will discuss what it takes to give children an education that goes beyond academics, moderated by Madeline Will, reporter for Education Week.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you everyone for being here and for this invitation. My name is Madeline. I'm a reporter for Education Week. I cover the teaching profession, so as you all know, it's been a busy year. From the teacher strikes and protests in half a dozen states this spring to the unprecedented wave of teachers we're seeing running for political office this fall. Teacher voice has been such an instrumental part of this coverage over the past year, and that's why I'm really excited to dig into these survey findings that cover teacher opinions on such a wide range of education issues. So for this panel conversation, we're going to be covering 3 critical issues: school choice, school safety and discipline, and accountability. So I'd like to introduce let our teachers introduce themselves. Christina, do you like to start?
I'm Christina Benz. I teach in Minneapolis Public Schools, and I've been teaching for, well, it's my 11th year going into this next year, and I teach visual arts.
Good morning. I'm Callie Jones, and I've served as a first grade teacher in Chicago Public Schools.
Good morning. My name is Dan Puglisi. I teach high school science at a place called City on a Hill in Boston.
Great. Well, so I'd like to start the conversation about school safety, which is probably one of the biggest news stories of the year. Education Week tracked 14 school shootings where someone was killed or injured in 2018 alone, and of course that includes the mass shootings in Parkland, Florida, and Santa Fe, Texas. And I thought it was really powerful that this survey found that 1/3 of teachers said their top safety concern at school was gun violence and school shootings. And at the same time, the survey also found that just over half of teachers said their school does a good job preparing them on how to address school violence. So Daniel, I'd like to hear your thoughts on those findings.
Yeah, so initially I was actually surprised by this finding, based on my own experiences of not really ever feeling unsafe at a school. But then thinking back to the actual climate of the country and all the school shootings that do happen, I can empathize with the teachers that do feel unsafe. And I think back to my own development as a teacher. I took a kind of a non-traditional route to be a teacher. I worked in some nonprofits, and I now teach at a charter school. And I happen to be in places where they did a lot of restorative justice training. And I think that that kind of exposure, that kind of training, really allows you to understand where a student's at and know each student at an individual level and know how to adjust. If there is any sense of violence, know how to treat that violence before it happens, before you really get to a point where a school shooting could be a thing, or even on the smaller scale, smaller types of violence, to really nip it in the bud early.
And of course, one of the most controversial proposals to, as we talk about school shootings, is the idea of arming teachers so that they can defend themselves and their students against intruders. I thought it was interesting that while the majority of teachers do oppose the idea of training teachers to carry guns in school, 29% of teachers favor the proposal, and with 10% strongly favoring it. Christina, were you surprised as well by that finding? What did you think about it?
Well, I have to ask you in the audience, would you want your child, your grandchildren, your nieces and nephews going to a school where a teacher may have a gun in the classroom? And so I pose those questions because I live about 5 minutes where Philando Castile was killed. And his death really affected me. And he worked in an elementary school in St. Paul, Minnesota. And his children there loved him. And I was not prepared in my pre-service education to have a gun in my classroom. And so knowing that, I know that my relationships with my students would be affected. And so I am surprised and I'm concerned. And I would have, like what Dan's talking about with restorative justice, we need more policies around restorative justice and tools and preparation for teachers, all teachers. So I don't think we need to have guns in the classroom.
Okay, so switching gears a little bit, I wanted to discuss how teachers say their schools should be evaluated. Teachers tended to pick measures of school climate and culture as important factors to evaluate their school's effectiveness, more so than they did traditional hard data like graduation rates, attendance data, standardized test scores. So Callie, why do you think that teachers value those types of maybe non-traditional measures?
I think they value them because thinking about the whole child, so academically, socially, emotionally, it's really important to create a climate in your school that nurtures all of those aspects of a child. So I know at my school, we look at having a conducive learning environment, and our principal really pushes us to make sure that we really believe like all students can learn. So looking at school climate and involving families and how they feel about your school climate is really a good way to see like how your school is doing. So looking at test scores is a good way, but looking at a school overall and looking at how your students are developing socially, emotionally, and academically is really important. So one thing we do at my school, we have a meeting every Tuesday, and we go over just 7 things that makes a school run, and 2 things that we talk about are having a conducive learning environment. And in having a conducive learning environment, that entails a multitude of things. So like greeting your kids in the morning, or having one-on-one conferences with your students, like monthly or however your time permits at school. I think your school climate just really nurtures your student, and having a positive school climate really nurtures students. It helps them grow.
Have you seen your students respond well to those kind of measures?
Yes, absolutely. So I teach first grade. I've taught third grade as well, and I've looped with the group I've had in first grade and a group I've taught in third grade. So looking at the impact that I had on them in first grade and seeing how they grew to third grade and how they did well in their standardized testing, but as well as like just growing as individuals, it was just great to see like how our school provides that and enforces that for our students.
That's great. I also thought it was interesting in the survey that the majority of teachers chose measures of students' academic growth over time as the single most important factor in their own teacher evaluations. But only about 10% picked student standardized test scores. So Callie, what are your thoughts on that breakdown?
I think that's interesting, and I would agree with that because like standardized testing is a summative assessment, so we look at what they've learned overall over the course of a year, but like informal assessments, so like their daily work, just things that they do throughout the day, is also really important to see how they're growing. So one thing that we do or we're moving toward at my school is project-based learning. Can't get that out. But that's really important because my principal wants us to move from being lecturers to facilitators of learning. So it's really important for students to own what they're learning and make sure that they are owners or taking ownership of their learning. So looking not just so much at standardized test scores is really important because some students aren't great test takers or they might have test anxiety. It's a lot of things that go into standardized testing, but just looking at things overall over the course of the year is really important to see how students are growing.
So when it comes to student discipline, the survey found that teachers are much more likely to say that positive behavior reinforcement and restorative practices are more effective than punitive measures like suspensions or expulsions. So Christina, I understand that you have some firsthand experience in this area. I'd love if you could tell us a little bit about it and what your thoughts are.
So my first 2 years, I worked for the Urban League, and they had a high school in Minneapolis. And there I worked with 14 to 21-year-olds, and it was an alternative high school. My students were court-ordered, and from there I had to be flexible. I had to work with where they were at, the needs that they had at the moment. And so with that experience, this past year, I worked with a student who was also on probation. He was an amazing student. He reached out to me via email several times in the semester, but he really struggled with attendance. And so my experience with restorative justice helped me work with him. He needed to complete projects to graduate, and because he was in and out, and I teach ceramics mostly, so I should say that. And with ceramics, the projects constantly overlap, and so if you're not there on time, you're gonna miss working with the clay. And so I said, when he came in one day, I said, I want you to take the clay home. I want you to take the tools home with you. Here's a list of the projects that you need to complete to effectively, pass my class, and bring them in. And so I worked with him instead of saying, okay, this is the regular schedule. If you don't do these projects, you're gonna pass. So I say all of that because he did do the projects, and he did graduate. And so if I wouldn't have worked with where he was at, that restorative technique, he would have struggled and he probably wouldn't have succeeded. And so teachers need more tools to be effective like that. And some are doing great and some are still learning, and that is why we're all teachers. We're all growing.
Yeah, and 40% of teachers said that they would like to have additional professional development on these types of practices. Christina, I'd imagine that that type of training on restorative practices is important in implementing school-wide. Can you talk a little bit about that implementation?
So I think in the last panel they talked about our Black and brown students struggle more compared to the white counterparts, and I think that's because of our institution that we are working in, and systemically we need to make changes. And so with that, we need to be preparing our teachers in pre-service programs through professional development, through self-learning to continue to learn about these tools so they can make changes in their classrooms like I did with this student.
Do you think training on these practices is widespread now, or do we still have a long way to go?
We have a long way to go. We have to. I mean, we are still working in a very old system, and that system is not working for all of our students. And until we make some progressive changes, we are going to be exactly where we're at.
So moving on to school choice, the survey found that the majority of teachers opposed almost every form of school choice that was asked in the survey, especially school vouchers. But only 6% said they don't support any form of school choice. So Daniel, as a charter school teacher, why do you think that teachers are perhaps open to school choice in theory, but maybe less so in practice?
Well, I think, like you said, I teach at a charter school, and I think the idea of charter schools and school choice, especially, I can speak for the high school level, as a student gets to a certain age, they really each learn in a different way, right? Everybody has different interests, everybody has different ways that they learn. So in an ideal world, we would have different kinds of schools for all these different kinds of students. So I work at a charter school, and I think that I'm working one of the good ones. Probably, but there's all different kinds of charter schools out there. Some of them not as good. Some of them are incredible, and some of them are just totally average, right? But I think that in reality, what people, especially public school teachers, are weary of is that those charter schools or any other kind of school choice will drain resources from a traditional public school. So I think that's the big concern there.
Yeah, and the survey data supported that. The teachers said they supported choice when it doesn't shift funds from public schools, when it's equally accessible to all students, and when it increases academic achievement for low-income students. So, Daniel, what are your thoughts on getting to that point and that finding?
Yeah, like I said, in an ideal world, that's what we go for. So my charter school, our advantage is that we're a very small school. So I've been teaching there 3 years. At this point, I've probably taught about half of the student body, or coached half of the student body, and I know pretty much everybody in the whole school. So that's a big advantage. If we could find a way to use charter schools in a way that's kind of symbiotic with the public schools, I think that would be the best for everybody. And I think we're working on that.
More partnerships and less polarizing debates.
Yeah, well, initially, I think the idea of charter schools was to be kind of experimental. Like we'll try to run a school this way, or we'll prioritize this or that. My school is big on civic leadership, so every week we have a town hall meeting, and we're really big on teaching kids how to debate, generating people that are active in their community. So if we can bring some of the good stuff from our charter school back to the public school, that would be the ideal situation.
Okay. So I wanted to finish our conversation by bringing it back to teacher voice, which of course is an underlying theme of the whole survey. And classroom observation by administrators and classroom observation by teachers were ranked as nearly equally important when it comes to choosing the most important factors for teacher evaluation. And we heard in the earlier panel that teachers are hungry for those kind of roles where they can do observations and other sorts of leadership roles. So Callie, can you talk a little bit about why you think that peer observation piece is so important?
Sure. So I think peer observation is important, one, because it builds camaraderie among colleagues in a school, and we learn best from each other. So a teacher might have a practice that works really well with her kids that you may have not had any idea about, and you can see and learn from that. But I think also having peer observation is important because you want to make sure that you trust your colleagues. Because I know one way that we're kind of evaluated in terms of like our school in Chicago is through the 5 Essential Survey from the University of Chicago. And one thing in that survey is how do you trust your colleagues? So I think having peer observation builds that trust, and it makes the principal, I won't say less accountable, but it makes the principal feel that the teachers are working and learning from each other. And being observed is important, and having that informal observation from your peer is important because it helps you perfect your practice. And when it comes time for like your actual formal observation from your principal, and I know in Chicago we're evaluated on the Danielson framework, and there are 4 components that go into that. So you have like instruction, your planning, talking with your students, and then like reflecting on your practice. So having that peer-to-peer interaction helps you, one, develop your practice to help you prepare for your actual observation, and it builds trust within the school. And then like having a principal observation sometimes can be very subjective depending on the principal, and I think your observations for your peers can be very objective, and you can have that safe space to talk to them about how you feel and things that you can correct without having that space of feeling like, oh, somebody's like, I'm gonna lose my job, or having like the insecurity of behind like a principal actually talking to you about what you can improve.
Great. Well, this has been such a great conversation. I want to thank all of you for your insights and for sharing your thoughts with us. Let's give them a round of applause.
Now, let's welcome to the stage Chicago teacher Tracy Netter, who will be presenting on the trends identified among teachers of color.
Thank you, Madeline Will, and my peers for your amazing perspective and conversations. We really appreciate it. As she stated, my name is Tracy Netter, and I am a teacher from the South Side of Chicago. South Side. I've been teaching for over 20 years, and I teach visual arts class in an elementary school, and I love it. I love being a teacher. I think that's important for people to know that teachers are not, we're not dragged in and forced to teach, that we actually do really love our jobs. I'm here to present the last piece of our points for our survey, and it's teachers of color. Research shows that being taught by teachers of diverse backgrounds benefit all students, but it's particularly important for students of color, as teachers of color can serve as role models for students and make schools more welcoming and inclusive. Unfortunately, although students of color make up more than half of all public school students, teachers of color still comprise only 20% of the educator workforce. Now, although that may be true, there has been progress in the last few decades, and districts have nearly doubled the percentage of teachers of color and hired them from the late 1980s to 2012. The survey responses from teachers of color, which make up 21% of the survey sample, to match the general teacher population, provide insight into how we can better recruit and retain a diverse and talented teacher workforce and close the teacher diversity gap in our schools. Now, you may notice that these trends overlap considerably with those Matt shared with us earlier, as non-white teachers represent slightly more than the national average of teachers in this age group. For example, similar to early career educators, we feel more prepared for the modern classroom. On the whole, we feel more prepared by our preparation programs to meet the needs of diverse students in contemporary classrooms. And in particular, we feel more prepared to use data to inform instruction, integrate technology in the classroom, and provide culturally responsive instruction. Additionally, we are more supportive of financial incentives and removing certification barriers. We are especially supportive of innovative strategies to attract diverse and talented teachers to the profession, but we most prefer financial incentives. Both of those working in hard-to-staff schools and hard-to-staff subjects to recruit candidates to the profession. And while we are generally more interested than our white peers in removing barriers to entry to the field, such as streamlining the certification process or allowing for alternative pathways, teachers of color are also more likely to support raising the bar to entry into the profession with higher GPA or SAT requirements. These responses suggest that teachers of color believe in creating more opportunities to bring new people into the profession and into the schools and subjects where we are most needed, while ensuring that we have what it takes to succeed in the classroom. Unfortunately, we feel less valued by those we work with most closely. Where teachers of color are more likely to say we feel valued by the U.S. as a whole than white teachers, we are more likely to say we do not feel valued by those closest to our work, our own colleagues and principals. This pattern fits with the larger issue of racism in the American workplace, in which people of color report feeling constantly on guard to address biases and discriminations at our jobs. We're also more supportive of school choice in service of low-income students. Similar to early career teachers, overall, teachers of color are much more supportive of school choice options such as low-income vouchers, universal vouchers, tax credits for private school scholarships, and charter schools. At the same time, we're more concerned that school choice options are accessible, free, and effective for vulnerable student populations. I believe we are particularly interested in expanding educational opportunities because of the historical inequities that prevented students of color and other vulnerable students from receiving the excellent education to which we are entitled. As we finish with the key trends and profiles, I want to leave you with some thoughts about my fifth grade teacher, Ms. McLemore. One of my favorite teachers, a teacher of color, and a role model for me to become a teacher. Ms. McLemore was fantastic. She always taught us to be upstanding individuals, self-advocates, and above all, creative. As we look to recruit, develop, and retain more teachers of color, it is critical that we listen to what the teachers already serving in the field have to say. Together, we can make teaching a profession that will attract talented and diverse people from across the country so that every student has someone as inspiring as Ms. McLemore in their classroom. Thank you very much for your time and attention. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Sydney Morris, co-founder and co-CEO of Educators for Excellence, to the stage. Sydney.
Hi there, everyone. Thank you again, Tracy. Let's give her another wonderful round of applause. As Tracy mentioned, my name is Sydney Morris, and I am the other co-founder and co-CEO of Educators for Excellence and a former second and third grade teacher in the Bronx. After listening to these amazing teachers, the voices from the classroom, I want to take a moment to say thank you to all of the teachers here in the room with us today and all of those across our nation. Thank you for your hard work that goes far beyond the time between the morning and dismissal bells. Thank you for your tireless passion and energy you bring to the classroom every single day. And thank you for inspiring children, our next generation, to learn and discover who they are. Teachers are incredible leaders. And yet, despite their leadership in the classroom, their expertise is often missing from the decision-making that's affecting the classroom. These survey results reflect so many different voices that should be heard. From a young teacher in a rural classroom worried if his preparation program adequately prepared him to differentiate instruction, to a teacher grappling with the daily challenges of serving her high-needs students in a big city. Despite the fact that the teachers we surveyed came from so many different backgrounds and communities, we found that their views are greatly aligned. No matter their background, teachers across the nation shared their concerns over inadequate compensation, school safety, and inequitable funding. They also expressed their support for more leadership opportunities that keep them in the classroom, and support for alternatives to overly punitive discipline practices. And teachers everywhere almost unanimously agree that they want more opportunity to be heard beyond their classrooms and to play a hand in shaping the policy that impacts their students and their profession. Hundreds of teachers added their thoughts in an open response to this question that can be summed up by this one educator's remark. Teachers are the ones who see needs in the classroom, but they are probably the least consulted when it comes to policy decisions. If there is one takeaway from this report, it is that we must create new avenues for teachers to exercise their leadership and expertise in service of their colleagues and their students. This finding, in fact, the entire purpose of this survey, parallels our mission at Educators for Excellence, to ensure that teachers have a leading voice in the policies that impact their students and their profession. By providing insight into educators' policy preferences, we hope politicians, Union representatives and district and school administrators will consider the leader in the classroom as they make decisions that affect all of our students. But this conversation today is only the beginning. Questions lead to more questions, and there is still so much that we can learn from teachers. We will keep seeking out their voices to guide our work, and we hope we can build on what we've learned this year with future surveys. Only by continuing to listen to teachers can we understand how their opinions on these matters change over time and gain perspective on the issues at the center of tomorrow's classrooms. We are extremely grateful to the 12 amazing current classroom teachers who created E4E's very first nationally representative survey to make sure that we captured the views of their colleagues across the nation on the most pressing issues impacting them and their students. After exhausting days with their students and their colleagues, they gave up their evenings and their weekends and their free time this summer to make sure that their peers across the nation had their voices heard. These teacher leaders embody E4E's vision of teachers leading the charge for change that they want to see. Let's give it up for them one more time. And thank you again to our fantastic moderators, Peggy Brookins and Madeline Will, and also to the entire Educators for Excellence team, and to all of you who joined us virtually or here at the National Press Club today. After listening to today's conversations, I feel deeply inspired to turn these teachers' words into actions and work together to amplify their voices and ideas so everyone hears loud and clear what they have to say. On behalf of our nation's students and teachers, I ask you to do the same and share the survey website, e4e.org/teacher survey, and continue the conversation by sharing what you learned here today with your networks and communities. Because when teachers drive the solutions to the toughest issues facing our schools, we can create meaningful and lasting change for our students, which I know is what we're all here to see accomplished. Thank you so much.